Thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it. My name is Shannon Caflisch. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Open Sky Group. I'll let Jeremy do his own introduction in just a second. Wanted to give you a quick overview of Open Sky Group, who we are, what we do. So Open Sky Group is a global consulting firm. We focus around supply chain execution, mainly in the TMS, WMS, labor management. We also have some consulting services. We also are very heavily focused with a lot of our clients today around automation, robotics, those types of things. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that today, but that's a little bit about who we are, what we do. Jeremy, you want to quickly introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, my name's Jeremy Hudson. I'm a senior director with Open Sky Group, and so I do a lot of our implementation projects. I also project very loudly to wake everybody up out there, so hopefully that worked. I think we're good there. All right, I'm hearing good things. All right, how many of us are happy to be back in person, right? How many people miss saying they're attending ProMat remotely and then not working for 2 days? Come on, someone did that, right? Someone had to have taken that tact. How many people first time back traveling? Any first time back travelers? First time on an airplane since the pandemic? Forgetting phone chargers, kind of sneaking in with the higher statuses on the airplane, right? We're all kind of there right now, and so that's the world we're living in. But no, we're excited to talk to you today about these topics. What we really want to emphasize as we go through this is not just survival, but really understanding how you can utilize the technology here at MODEX to really thrive, to really make that next level step in your operations. We're really excited to talk about that. So a few things we're going to cover. First of all, we want to cover this SaaS topic. We're hearing a lot about SaaS. We primarily implement WMS, TMS, and LMS solutions. Now, how many people, show of hands, are using SaaS today somewhere in their organization? Software as a service solutions. You're going to get a lot of this workout today, right? So people mainly do cardio at MODEX and the legs. This is going to be your arm workout today, right? So everybody get used to this. I'm going to ask for a lot of interaction there. But how many of you are using SaaS for your WMS solution? Anybody doing a SaaS WMS? Right? So we've got one. So that should tell you, right, that this is new. This is a new thing. So we want to talk a lot about what that means for us, what it means for a SaaS solution in the WMS world. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about is automation, right? So what we also want to talk about, and these two things will come together, we'll explain that as we go, but how do you choose the right automation for you? How do you choose the right automation for your operation? And how does that complement a SaaS solution, a cloud solution, or an on-premise solution? So hopefully bring those two topics together and really gain ideas on how to use technology throughout your organization. So let's talk about challenges. Let's introduce why we're talking about this. So I'm going to go through a few ones that we've seen. So welcome to 2022, folks. The world has changed in the last 3 years. I don't know if anybody else has faced any challenges in the last 3 years. It's been a difficult time. Some of my shows on Netflix have been later than I thought. They broke Ozark into 2 seasons. Oh yeah, and there's been a few things going on at work too. We've seen a lot of port delays, constrictive technology, customer demands are changing constantly. We've seen labor. Anybody not dealing with labor shortages in warehousing right now? If so, you can have the microphone and do the rest of the presentation, because I'd rather hear about that. But labor shortages, supply shortages, and so I don't know about you, but I care a lot more about container ships now than I ever have in my entire life. Not just the ones that are cramming into canals, but just the ones that are bringing all that product that I need. Back order demand, fulfillment of back orders. We're seeing a lot of challenges around that as well. And then again, right with that point, shipyard congestion. Now it's not just about what's on the water, it's about what's on the rail, it's about what's in the shipyard, it's about what's in your yard. All of those things matter for us now. Government mandates and laws are changing constantly. I don't know if any of you work in healthcare industry, but certainly DSCSA compliance and things of that sort are always a fun challenge. And then finally, delayed, missed, canceled shipments. Anybody that's as impatient as I am around those shipments you're waiting for in the mail. You get impatient, you want to cancel something. Now we're all dealing with that backlog in our warehouses as well. And so all of these challenges have really brought strain into the everyday lives of what we do, right? And it's amplified what we have to solve in our supply chain. So we really want to tell you how SaaS and automation can really drive some improvement in these specific areas throughout your operation.
Sure. So I think as we've seen all of these challenges come to bear, one of the things that we've seen, probably more than any of you want to admit, your senior leadership is pushing down on you. How do we improve our supply chain? How do How do we become more flexible? How do we meet all of these changes? So one of the biggest challenges that our customers tell us is, hey, we want to be flexible. We need to be able to meet these demands. We need to be able to hire more people, train more people. We want to be able to retain people. One of the biggest things is, how do we do that with the systems we have? Most of you did not raise your hand when Jeremy asked about SaaS platforms, so that leads me to believe you're probably facing this challenge, which is legacy systems. The biggest thing is as you look at those systems that were built 2008, 2010, 2012, even if you look back 3 to 5 years ago, systems that you may have deployed are not configured, they're not set up, they're not designed to work in today's world that's ever changing, right? I've got customers today, Jeremy and I have clients that are manufacturing customers that are now not just sending out to distributors or to bulk warehouses, they're actually shipping to consumers. That's a huge change in how they operate, how they run their warehouses. So as you look at those things, you look at, is it time to upgrade? Do I have the resources to do that? Do I have the resources to move from an older version? Most of our customers, their IT staffs, they're already taxed with trying to deploy the latest and greatest and some of the things Jeremy's going to talk about from an automation standpoint. So do I have resources? Is it going to scale? This is a huge one, right? We have customers coming to us today that say, hey, 3 months ago I was doing 20,000 shipments, today I'm doing 45,000. Our projection by the end of the year is 60. How do I even ingest all of that into my distribution network? How do I fulfill those orders? What am I going to do? So not just talking about labor, but operationally, et cetera. And so that's one of the other big things. And then you talk about SaaS. As your teams, anybody here ever walk in and have their CFO go, hey, you know what, I want to invest more in our IT team. We should get more IT resources. No, they want to put more feet on the floor. So one of the biggest things now in today's world that's changed probably for us in the last 2 years is more and more clients are looking at SaaS solutions. How do I deploy this quicker? Right? Gone are the days of the runway of a 12, 16, 18-month WMS implementation. Any of you guys ever sat through one of those where it's 14, 16 months and hopefully you're getting ready to do UAT, and by the time you get to that point, your finance office is going, my God, how did we spend all this money? So that's one of the biggest things is, how do I deploy quicker? How do I start getting return on my investment? How do I allow our operations to be as flexible as what my customer demands are changing to? So as we look through some of these solutions and talk about these things, those are some of the biggest decisions that you guys have to look at and say, how are we going to fill those gaps? What are we going to do?
Yeah, and let's clarify a few terms here as well. And so SaaS, what we mean by that is software as a service, for anybody unfamiliar, right? So what that means is typically from a WMS perspective, a warehouse management system perspective, what that typically means is you're going to have the software vendor themselves really host your system, support your system, and upgrade your system routinely. And so this is treating your WMS more like your iOS devices, right? Where they just kind of upgrade, apply patches, et cetera, overnight for you, right? And so that's what we mean when we're talking about SaaS solutions. And then we also have cloud solutions. And so cloud is really where just the infrastructure itself isn't on premise. It's not in a closet with a bunch of fire extinguishers and everything else, right? That typically means that it's going to be hosted outside of your building, your physical location, by a company that does infrastructure maintaining, right? And then finally, you have on-premise. This is the old school model, and still tried and true for the record, but this is where the servers still belong to you. You do have them packed away in a closet, and sometimes that is advantageous. So let's talk about which option fits you best, right? And so first of all, I'm going to say something controversial. Everybody brace yourselves, buckle up. Controversy here, right? It isn't a one-size-fits-all decision. And so if you're walking around to some of these different booths and you're thinking about a WMS implementation, and they tell you, we only offer this model, that may not be the right choice for you. Right. It's important to understand that, right? So public service announcement, if you're being forced into SaaS, you should probably stop and reconsider your options. Now that's not to say that's not what's best for the solution, and it ultimately isn't what's best for you, but you need to understand that you do need options when considering this. Now, let's think why SaaS may work really well for you. If you do have a stressed out IT team, if some poor soul out there is answering phone calls every hour of the day because something went down and they have to go over and they have to restart the system, they have to do a bounce, they have to restart things, they have to see why an integrated file didn't load, et cetera, and you simply don't have the staff to cover that type of need, that on-demand requirement, SaaS would be a great option for you. If you have specific service levels that you need to meet, if you need your software to be up for a very specific interval, then SaaS may be a great solution for you. However, if you're heavily customized, if you have a solution that's very fine-tuned specifically for your operation, then SaaS is likely not going to be a great fit for you. You've got to figure, when you call SaaS support, they're typically not dedicated to your business. That phone isn't just for you, okay? They're going to answer that phone all day long and take calls from every type of person. They're looking for standardization. If you're customizing heavily to meet your business and you call them and you go, hey, my specific screen that says this, does this, and acts this way, I need you to fix that, they're going to go, right? I've never heard of that screen. I don't know how to fix that, right? And so SaaS may not be the right solution for you. That's where you need to retain a specific IT team, and on-prem or cloud may be a better solution for your operation. Now, cloud, where that's a better fit for you is scalability, man. If your business is growing quickly, you may not need the biggest server in the world today, but you need those servers to grow as you go. You need them to be responsive to your needs. If they need to spin up more digital devices quickly, that's really where cloud's going to make the most impact for you and still give you the autonomy to customize the way you need to customize, to extend, to take advantage of competitive advantages, right? All of those things are going to be important for cloud. And then finally, on-premise. If you've got a network that requires significant on-demand needs, so if you need that responsive network, I've got clients that have print and apply systems 5 feet away from a scanner, and they need that response time in a millisecond. I can't promise that you're going to have a fast enough network to ever make that work when your servers are halfway across the country. I just cannot guarantee that. I could have the best WMS in the world. It still doesn't guarantee that response time is going to be there to tell that Panda machine what label to print. And so ultimately, you may need on-prem if you're going with a highly automated, needs response immediately solution, then you still better have that server room planned out in your next building. Right? So keep in mind, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and all of this is important when talking to a WMS vendor. So when considering what WMS to buy, when considering how to implement your WMS, guarantee this will be one of the first conversations that come up, right? And you need to really consider what fits your model best. And so that's the key to understand around SaaS. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Consider what fits your operation best.
Any questions on that so far? Any questions? Anything? No? I would say the one thing I would want to add to that is keep in mind, we have customers today doing all 3 versions of those platforms. We have some customers today who are deploying in certain situations on-premise and using cloud as well. So don't think, oh, hey, I've got to move to the next level, I've got to accelerate, I've got to automate, I've got to do all these things, so I have to go to the cloud or I have to be in SaaS. You can still do those things, and Jeremy's got some stories we're going to talk about here in a little bit about customers who are deploying on-prem, but heavily automated. Yep. Still have automation, still have robotics. So there's a capability and there is the ability there to meld those two together. You don't have to go to cloud to be able to do all those other things.
All right, so let's talk about automation some and what that means to us. So when we talk about automation, so for those of you that just got whiplash, that's an accurate feeling, right? We just switched topics majorly. So some of you are like, hey, I just work in the IT world. The only thing I care about is SaaS, right? And that's perfectly fine. That's good for you. Just sit through this. You'll learn something anyways, right? But for a lot of us, you are at MODEX because of automation. You're at MODEX because the robots are cool to look at and you want one of those things, right? So let's talk about automation and what that means to you. So first of all, a lot of decisions. Just like SaaS, a lot of decisions to make around automation and what type works best for you. This was a lot easier conversation like 5 years ago, because it was just like, hey, there's like 3 options, right? But now there's a different robotic arm in every booth. There's a different type of automation. I never thought there'd be so many ways to convey something, right? I mean, there's just all kinds of options out there, and so you've got a lot of decisions to make. And a big one here is, will it harmonize? And so I'm going to say harmonization a lot. That's a big word for me. Now, I had asked Shannon to sing with me to demonstrate the harmonization, and he refused. And so I'm sorry. It was something I wanted to do. We were going to do a whole barbershop thing, and it just didn't work out. Maybe next year, come back. But this year, we're just going to talk about harmonization. And what I really mean is how those solutions work with one another. Right. So, again, big statement here. Everybody listen up. Wake up, folks. I know you're hungry. It's lunchtime. We'll get there, right? But big statement here. Most systems in this building, actually almost every system in this building, cannot run a warehouse independently. They cannot do it themselves. You buy a robot, the robot needs someone to give it instructions.
Right.
The instruction giver needs fulfillment orders to be able to fulfill those orders from a WMS. All these systems are interdependent upon each other. That's the only reason we're so nice to each other here at MODEX, because we all need each other. That's the only reason. But it's all one big ecosystem. This is kind of like the beginning of The Lion King, except with more sport coats, right? That's basically what MODEX is. We're all just in one environment. And so, I mean, that's what these systems are. I mean, automation is desperately dependent upon WMS, and you have to make sure all of those things work together. That's a big deal for us. And then finally, is it going to scale, right? So anybody's willing to admit they put in automation 10 years ago and it has a fixed capacity, and now you're not able to hit your capacities because your automation's too slow. No one's willing to admit it. That's all it is, right? But I've got several folks that are facing that issue. They put in ASRs, they put in robotics 10 years ago, and it was the only technology they had, and now it's like, man, my orders have doubled since then, right? It hit my capacity 10 years ago. Now I'm in trouble. I've seen folks that have that problem within 2 years, right? How do I add more automation? How do I make sure the automation I'm choosing is scalable? And so a few topics here. First of all, I like to say the first thing you'd automate in your warehouse is a WMS system. So quick metaphor here. Last year I took on a project. I was converting my VHS tapes at home. My parents did a lot of home videos when I was young, and I was converting those VHS tapes to digital. And so I bought a VCR, which was extremely expensive. I'm in the wrong line of work. I'm going to start selling VCRs. But I plugged in a VCR to my brand new, beautiful television. I mean, this thing is great. Big TV, awesome, right? Brand new technology. Plug in my VCR, I play those tapes, and guess what? The quality on the TV was not any better than it was in 1992, right? The video still looked the same. My 1992 4-year-old self still looked grainy and difficult image to perceive, etc., right? The moral of that story is you can go buy the brand new robot all the way up at the front of the show. Those guys that rent all that space, buy one of those robots, plug it into a super old WMS, and I guarantee you it's not going to get much better. If you've got an old WMS powering your warehouse, running your warehouse, adding a robot to the mix isn't going to fix all your problems. Now I need to say that more quietly. I don't know how many of these robots are trained to listen to that, but you do need to understand robots don't fix everything, right? So it's about understanding the progression and how you progress your solutions within the warehouse. Should I really focus on my WMS first, right? Get that to the caliber it needs to be, the responsiveness, the instructions, the autonomy of a WMS. That really needs to be there before you start layering in all of the automation that you're seeing here at MODEX. Second, responding to labor and the amount of labor you need. So I always want to emphasize that you can't perceive all of the robotics here at MODEX as people replacement robots. That's not what all of these things are intended to do. Keep in mind, every single one of those robots out there still has a salesperson selling them. There's still people required. Shannon is really scared about that, but until these robots start selling themselves, you got to remember, they're not replacing people everywhere, and that's the same for the warehouse. These robots many times are intended to do travel reduction, they're intended to do job simplification, they're intended to reduce safety hazards, they're intended to do a lot of things, but it's not necessarily going to replace all your people. So you need to understand how to balance those things. How do I consider my people in addition to my robots, and what type of methods are required to make those robots useful? And finally, go with a crawl, walk, run approach. It's not dangerous to do that. I've seen folks make the mistake of buying everything they can from an automation standpoint and then trying to piece it all together. I help a lot of clients who say, listen, I bought the best of breed robots, now what do I do? Right? And it's a matter of understanding, how to piece all those things together. And again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Scalability. I mean, when you look at some of these devices, look at how much is bolted to the ground. Look at how many static picker stations you have. Look at how many individuals can be using a machine at one time. I did an implementation probably, I'm getting too old, 7, 8 years ago, where they implemented this machine, and it was really cool. It replaced people. It did all this cool stuff, but it only worked at a specific pace. And I walked in, and sure enough, that machine was parked in a corner. And I go, guys, that thing's really cool. It was shiny, new, everything. And it's parked in a corner, and they go, well, yeah, it's peak season. I can put 3 pickers out there on that line and pick way faster than that machine will. Right? And that's the boat they were stuck in. And so they'd much rather bring in 3 pickers, have pickers run down the line and do that, versus having that machine in that line constantly going back and forth. And that's that's the corner everybody's boxed themselves into here. And Shannon and I were talking, it's kind of like buying a coffee machine when you buy automation. I know, you guys already knew that. I get it. Everybody's like, yeah, duh, coffee machine. But no, if you go buy a Keurig machine, guess what? I hope you really like the Keurig pods, because you're not doing any other type of coffee at that point, right? If you go buy an espresso machine, that's all you've got, right? And so when you make these automation choices, you've got to consider what works best with your WMS, what's going to scale best for your operation, right? And what's going to harmonize. How do you make these systems work together? My implementations, I did one for an e-com site. We were running cartonization logic in one software, slotting software separately. We were running a print and apply system. We were running a parcel manifesting system, a WMS, and a WCS, WES. Oh my God, these rings under my eyes, I earned them, guys. It was a lot of work to get all those things to work together. That's 6 different softwares that had to work cohesively. And so don't think you can just go buy a bunch of software out there and then just plug it all in and expect it to go. These things require a lot of testing, a lot of simulation to make sure they work together.
I think the other thing to really emphasize is the crawl, walk, run approach. We use that a lot at Open Sky Group with all of our implementations, whether it's software or automation, robotics, et cetera. But I think one of the most important things is to think of, to Jeremy's point, robots don't replace every single person, and sometimes they don't need to. Think about it from this standpoint. One of our clients was trying to figure out, they were getting a lot of push down from their CIO, CEO about how do we get into automation? We need to start automating. We need to start getting robotics out there. What they figured out is a lot of their tasks, to Jeremy's point, was I can put 3 pickers out there and it's faster than if I use a robot. But they also started to look at their labor statistics and see people started to slow down at the end of the day, or a lot of people were taking trash breaks, et cetera. So what they started to look at is let's automate some of those other tasks that people are being pulled away for, right? I don't want to pay some guy that should be out picking cases, picking niches, to take the trash from one end of the warehouse to the other. So they actually took that approach, and their first step into robotics was automating their trash removal out of their warehouse, right? So almost all warehouses have a trash can at the end of one of the aisles, or at least every other aisle. So they put robots out there to basically, once those were full, the robot takes it over, they take it over to the trash recycling area, et cetera, drop it off, bring it back. They saw an increase in performance in their employees because no longer were people taking that and then they got to drag the trash can all the way across the warehouse and then drag it back. Or worse yet, they'd put it on a pallet jack with no other products and then run the pallet jack all the way over there. So when you think about kind of how you approach automation and robotics, again, you don't have to go buy the fanciest machine out there. You can sometimes start simple and work your way up. And that's probably the best example I have, because they now use some other things that do some things with goods to person, a few other things, but that's how they started. They automated their trash removal. Something as simple as that saved them a little time. They saw the value of what they were doing, and then they eased their way into the next steps of automating their processes.
Yeah, and Shannon, I should emphasize as well, this is kind of like taking car buying advice from your mechanic, all right? Open Sky doesn't sell a robot. You can stop by our booth later, right? But we don't sell robots. We don't make robots. We don't do robots, okay? We do primarily warehouse management software systems. So trust me, this is an unbiased opinion here of understanding that, you know, what type of robots work for you. Don't hesitate to ask some of your WMS vendors, hey, what have you seen work best? Because we all have to fight it, right? We're the ones there at Go Live, stressed out and eating gummy worms, trying to get stuff to work. And if the robots aren't working the way we expect them to, right, it's a big pain for us. And so we've got a decent perspective on this, right? And we've seen folks make mistakes, and we've seen folks do this right. And so just know there's a lot of emphasis on testing and simulation. I want to emphasize that more because I've seen people make that mistake, right? If you are doing an automated warehouse or a system, you know, where you have to have these harmonies work together, do not underestimate testing. And please, force your WCSs, your WESs, your warehouse control systems, your warehouse execution systems, please force them to figure out testing. Please, for my sake, I'll support all of you. You can call me unsolicited. It's fine. I'll do it for free, and I'll pressure them with you. I bring the muscle here, right? And so please force them to figure out testing. I can't tell you how many times I've heard WCSs, WESs, right, that say, oh, we can't test. It's got to be in prod. We need the conveyors. We need the controls, all that stuff. Lord have mercy. We need to figure that out, right? We need to figure out how to simulate this stuff. We need to figure out how to test this stuff in advance. A lot of the time, trust me, I know all your executives out there who have suddenly figured out the supply chain departments, right? We're all famous now. 2 years ago, supply chain, it was like, what, you guys supply chains? right? Now we're all famous. They talk about us on CNN and everywhere. Supply chain's a big deal now. So they've all called our departments and said, hey, we want you to invest. You need to do things, right? A lot time for testing, a lot time for simulation. Make sure you're testing these things out because the harmony is key. Nothing will give you more headaches at go live and post go live than trying to figure out how all these solutions are intended to work together.
So we made it. We took both sides of the slide, put them together. We kind of Googled what the supply chain struggles happening today, and these two things came up. Actually, I'm kidding. Our customers gave us most of this information. So, you know, you kind of look at all this stuff and you start to lay it out and you say, okay, we're looking at, you know, will it scale? You know, will it harmonize? Jeremy talked about those two things. Those are extremely critical. You look at things as far as what type of automation. We talked about that. You don't have to automate everything. You don't have to do, you know, all the processes in your warehouse. You know, you look at all of those different decisions, and ultimately it comes down to what's going to help you guys improve from a process standpoint. What can you actually take out to the warehouse and execute with? And those are the most critical things you want to take out of these decision points, because truthfully, when you look at, is it time to upgrade? If you have to ask yourself that question, it probably is, right? If you haven't upgraded in the last 2 to 3 years, whether you're using a WMS that we put in or somebody else put in, you're probably using technology that hasn't been improved upon. So you need to look at your WMS provider and go, hey, it's time to take advantage of some of the cool things that are out there. You look at things like, you know, scalability. That's a huge one. Anybody in here doing more orders now than they were 2 years ago? Yeah, everybody is, right? Anybody doing more than you were 6 months ago? I mean, I have a customer that said, hey, we're going to scale this year. Our projections, we're going to go from 40,000 order lines a month, I think they said, to during our peak, we're projecting 130,000 order lines based on what we're seeing for order flow. That's a 4x growth. Not very many people can handle that type and still stay online and stay on track. So thinking about those types of things is how do we bring all that together and put a solution out there that actually provides us some benefits and actually works for our people.
Yeah, and more importantly here, right, I want to make sure we draw the connection here, right? So again, to Shannon's point, we just kind of Googled supply chain, and SaaS and automation were two really popular words. So we just said, let's present on that, right? But no, truthfully, these two, first of all, when we're talking to clients, prospective clients, et cetera, these are the two biggest questions they have.
Absolutely.
Should we automate? How should we automate? Should we go to SaaS? How should we go to SaaS? And we really wanted to make sure we drilled in on those, but we also wanted to make sure you understood how these two connect to one another. So why would SaaS affect automation? Well, we talked about earlier the connection, right, and just the network dependencies and the performance dependencies of a SaaS network. But also, automation more than anything is going to standardize your processes. As beautiful as these robots are, most of them I don't think have adapted with like full AI functionality yet, right? Musk's got a few more years on that one before we need to worry about it. And so in the meantime, most of these robots want to be repetitive. They want to do the same process over and over and over again. The more your processes are repeatable, the more they're simplified. One thing these robots typically don't do is they don't vary from what they're told to do, and so they're just going to repeat that, which makes the SaaS end of this much more viable, because it's much easier to call a SaaS team and say, hey, listen, robot number 7 is down. They'll know exactly what to do in the handbook, right? They'll know exactly what page to flip to. They've got that under control, versus calling your SaaS group and being like, yeah, I got a picker named Jimmy, and he keeps getting this error message, right? Like, that's a whole different ballgame, right? So automation influences that SaaS supportability a lot. Now, on the other side of that, again, if you're using a lot of automation that's extremely dependent on timing, and if anybody's ever listened to like VocalX software and you hear those beeps for network dependencies, Lord have mercy, those things keep me up at night, right? Maybe SaaS isn't the best solution for you, depending on a lot of different things. And I'm not talking bad about SaaS here. SaaS solution's great, love it, right? It's also the network. It's also all the other dependencies along the line. I'm telling you, nothing can plague you more than a network. And so just understand there's a lot of dependencies that go throughout a warehouse beyond just a SaaS versus automation solution, but they are heavily dependent upon each other. I would say if you're going with automation, it definitely qualifies you more to look at a SaaS solution, assuming you have the network capabilities to support that, right? And so that's really the connection I want to draw here, versus if you're non-automated, then you probably need to think through those things together.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about a few specific use cases. First, I want to talk about a solution that was on-prem and automated. I did this project about a year ago, and so what these clients were doing, they did an on-prem solution, so server rooms were tucked away, right, in the warehouse itself, and they were going with a fully automated solution. And so let's talk about that one for a while. First of all, on-prem, they've had to make adjustments since going live, right? So they've had to add servers. As they've experienced growth, as they entered 2022, right, this was a home furnishing supplier, and they found that a lot more people wanted to buy couches. Turns out, you realize how uncomfortable a couch is when you sit on it 8 hours a day because you can't go anywhere, right? And so everybody decided, I'm going to buy a new couch for COVID, right? And they got a couch, and suddenly our servers weren't adequately sized anymore. So they had to make the investment to invest more in that on-prem solution, right? But what they also needed to do was scale during that period of time with their automation, and I won't lie to you, they've struggled with that because they had wired pick-to-light. They had a goods-to-person system that had a limited number of bots with a limited number of ports, and that's made it to a place where they've had to go back and do significant reinvestment on automation. So again, this is unsolicited kind of like advice from someone that doesn't really have a horse in that race. Again, you've got to look at scalability. There's some really, really cool new stuff out there that scales way better than we used to. Like, we used to be a very fixed port automation world, and now we're seeing options that can drive all over the place on the floor and everything else, and so you have to consider those types of things, right? And so that's a great example of where we saw a client go with an on-prem solution with automation. Now, the second example I have, I really like this one. These guys were cloud, and they've done some automation. So, full disclosure, this company, pretty nifty business model. They are responsible for making
Baby formula.
cleaning wipes. They are responsible for making flu medication. They are responsible for making sinus medication. So beautiful business model. Use one product or use the other, right? But obviously, in the last 2 years, their business has exploded. And them being on a cloud solution has helped them significantly because they have onboarded 4 warehouses in the last 2 years. Once again, I want to remind you, these rings under my eyes are hard-earned, okay? So 4 warehouses in the last 2 years, and all they have to do is call up their cloud provider and say, fire up another one. The cloud provider sends the contract, they sign it, boom, you got an instance the next day, basically. So they're able to scale extremely rapidly. We're not waiting. Anybody try to order computer parts lately? Like, if you're looking for servers, RF devices, et cetera, I mean, we're all like, oh my God, check the tracking, check the tracking, check the tracking. It's still not here, right? And so cloud solutions are different. They can scale according to how your business progresses. Now, the other cool thing about this is, and my 3PLs will love this, if there's any 3PL representatives in the room, this is one of those companies that uses 3PLs, but they own their own system. Right? So the company itself owns the WMS, but they'll actually contract 3PLs and say, hey, here's the system, you use our system, we retain visibility and control, you follow our standard processes. So this gives them a lot more autonomy from an IT support side because they're able to implement that solution, right? And they're able to scale accordingly. So it creates some challenges for the 3PLs. I've been on that side of the fence. I used to work in 3PL industry. Not exactly the best scenario for them, but it certainly gave this company the autonomy they needed to be able to say, listen, this is the solution we want. These are the processes we specifically want followed. Oh, and we need that warehouse to be running in 3 months, right? That was the solution that worked best for this company. And then finally, SaaS automated solutions. So we do have clients that are using this model. Again, SaaS is still a relatively new adaptation to the WMS world, but this was a client who made the sacrifice of not doing significant customizations. They went into their project knowing they wanted to keep things simple, they wanted to follow standard processes, they abided by that, and ultimately they met the SaaS requirements, and at the same time they were able to leverage automation such as tuggers, et cetera, throughout their operation, AGVs, all that good stuff, while still having that SaaS solution out there. So again, it runs the gamut, and I just want to emphasize it's not a one-size-fits-all, but there are solutions out there for each one of these combinations.
Yeah. So as Jeremy was talking about, I think one of the interesting things is surviving versus thriving, right? So probably a lot of you are surviving. I would imagine most of you are surviving, or you wouldn't be here and have a job today.
Is anybody not surviving?
I mean, you're at least getting by. You're probably shipping. I mean, we have a lot of customers who are like, yeah, we can get product out the door, but good God, if we lose something, we'll never find it, or if we get behind by half a day, it takes us a week to catch up. So we have a lot of clients that are surviving. But as you heard Jeremy talk about, some of our customers are moving into that thriving space, right? Where they're actually executing. They're not sitting around, as Jeremy kind of continues to build this slide out. Some of these things, these are all things that came from our customers when we started talking to them about, hey, what's going on in your space today? You know, we pick, pack, and ship orders. That's, you know, that's what we do. We just pick, pack, we get them out. Everybody's doing it as quick as they can. That's it. You know, what does that look like versus thriving? You know, Jeremy talked about one of our furniture retailers. They were, you know, they were struggling, right? Their revenues, their orders increased dramatically over the last 2 years. So they thought when they started that project, they were thriving right then, right? They kind of felt like, hey, we're going to be thriving because we're doing all this cool automation. What they didn't realize is 6 months in, that automation wasn't going to support everything they were trying to do. So they went from thriving back to surviving, and now they're trying to move forward again. You know, leveraging technology, using that technology to beat the expectations, right? Anybody in here ever order anything from Amazon? You get it, what, the next day? I mean, I've ordered stuff before. I mean, kids actually order more stuff than me, but, you know, they order something on a Tuesday, and they're like going out on the front door on Wednesday looking for the box. I'm like, hey, you just ordered it like 12 hours ago. Give it a minute. But, you know, everybody wants that type of stuff, right? And you guys, as distributors or shippers or 3PLs or whatever your manufacturers, are being held to those types of standards as well. And that's one of the things we hear most from our customers is the Amazon effect. Not only is it impactful in the labor space, and Jeremy and I have done a number of conversations where we've presented about labor and the Amazon effect there, but the Amazon effect is real on the other side of the house too, where now you guys who used to have, you know, 3, 5, 7, 10-day lead times, I've got people, you know, coming to us saying, hey, we shut down at 2 o'clock, our order cutoff's at 2 o'clock, and if they order by then, they have to ship by 6 p.m. that night. That's not something we've ever done before. How do we do that? How can we leverage technology to do that? So I think that's one of the biggest things as Jeremy goes through a couple more of these. You know, how do you go from just getting by to just holding on to just having just enough labor to being to a point where, hey, we're being successful, and if we have a big, you know, what happens if my organization is featured on the Today Show or something like that, and all of a sudden orders spike again? Being able to sustain that and get through and weather that storm.
Yeah, and I think another one, Shannon, here that I like to draw attention to is that staffing challenge. And so, again, I think we're all surviving, right? That's why you're still here at MODEX and your operation's still running. You've still got some warehouses out there with the lights on, right? So we're all surviving, but you're likely doing it with a temp agency on speed dial, right? So you've likely got that temp right at arm's reach. Hey, I need 7 more for tomorrow, please. I need to have those, right? And so that's where we're at right now. We're constantly adjusting our staffing. We have to have dynamic staffing requirements, et cetera, right? How do we really thrive here? Where we've seen folks succeed is the implementation of incentivization for employees, the use of simplification with automation. So how can I simplify jobs? And another one we're seeing pop up is gamification, right? Yes. Scenarios where you can make work more fun for employees. So number one, I'm not running around all day. I'm not lifting 50 pounds constantly. Number two, I'm rewarded for what I achieve. And number three, I can constantly monitor those achievements in real time within a system. And so looking at solutions like that have eased the pain, I promise you. The other thing we're seeing is better WMSs, better solutions yield quicker training. So scenarios where you had to pair that poor guy up with another person for a week to train on their jobs. Oh yeah, by the way, tribal knowledge, you got to open that box and don't ship that one without that part, right? Those days are gone. Providing those prompts, pictorial aids, etc., is a big factor here in making sure your employees are happy to come to work and happy to be there and support your operation.
Well, I mean, I think that's a good point. We have customers who come to us and say training's our number one thing, right? I don't have the time to train somebody up for 60, 90 days. Leveraging automation technologies, we have customers who are, you know, leveraging some robotics and some of those other things. They're training people in 36 hours, right? 2 or 3 shifts, they're up and running. And they've got people that are actually, you know, in the labor force, they're actually producing results and they're actually meeting standards versus they have that big giant curve of hopefully someday down the road they'll be able to keep up with the people that have been here for 15 years.
Yep. So the next one I wanted to talk about here is your IT staff. How many people have that one poor guy locked away in a closet, right? You kind of slide food under the door, and then he just has to answer that phone all the time. Like, he's never going to leave, right? You can't let him leave your organization because he knows where the bodies are buried, right? Like, he's got everything mapped out in his head, right? He knows exactly how to fix it. No one else does. Everybody, we got to call Phil. Someone get Phil on the phone. He can't take a vacation.
I thought you were going to say
Everybody's got a Phil, okay? So that's survival. I'll give it to you. Phil's doing a great job. There's no doubt about that, right? But that's where we look at moving to SaaS or cloud-based solutions where you can have that consistent supportability, where it doesn't have to be Phil on the other side of the phone line, right? It can be someone that has a general knowledge of how your software is intended to work. They can troubleshoot, they can trace, they can resolve. Those are the types of solutions we're looking for to give poor Phil a vacation finally, right? Let them leave that closet. But I mean, that's really where we're seeing companies excel here. The companies that are best of breed, that are really succeeding in the marketplace, are achieving that through having consistent, standardized IT support.
So Jeremy talks about somebody being in the closet. We actually have a 3PL.
Yes, we do.
That I figured you might even use his name, but I didn't know. But we actually have a customer that was really challenged from a transportation perspective. They were doing everything very manually. They were looking to upgrade TMS. We went, one day we go out to meet with this guy in New Jersey, and I'm like, oh, hey, we're here to meet with so-and-so, and where's his office? And the lady kind of laughed when we walked back. Literally, he was in a closet. Like, they had a desk in the closet, and that's where he worked.
It's a fire hazard. It's not good. We can't give you their name.
I'm happy to say he does actually have an office now. They deployed a SaaS TMS solution, and he got to move to a. I don't think it's very big, but it does have a window at least. So there you go.
It's safer.
But yes.
And then finally, let's do some word association here. Anybody happy when they hear the word software upgrade? Is that right? Everybody kind of cringes. I saw a few flinches out there. Someone screamed in the back. I heard it faintly. But software upgrades can be a really scary thing, right? So how many of you kind of have that aging software? You go year by year. That vendor keeps calling, hey, you want to upgrade this year? Let's go play a round of golf. We'll talk about your upgrade. And you're just like, ugh. I'll take the round of golf, right? But the upgrade, let's just wait things for smooth. We'll wait for things to calm down, right? That's the standard. Shannon, you've heard that one before, right?
Just a few times.
Shannon's in sales. He's heard this one before, right? But upgrading's a big challenge for us. And listen, we're all reaching, like we've all got that number in the back of our heads, that, what is it, 8 years, 4 years of support? When does the Windows SQL Server go out? Like you've got all those numbers you're trying to like suppress, but it's gonna find you. Right? Like I guarantee you folks, it's going to get there. That's where SaaS makes a big difference as well. So I do want to emphasize, listen, SaaS is more expensive. The intent is, if you implement a SaaS solution, you can reduce your IT staff, you can save on things like upgrade challenges, et cetera, and that's the benefit you're going to get. And that's a great explanation for it. So I can't sit here and tell you SaaS is cheaper than other options, but these are the benefits you get. You get Phil out of the closet, right? And he can actually go take a vacation. He can do things with his family. He can meet people again, right? So you get that solution, plus you get upgrades. Every 2 years, new solution with new features. Yep. It's tested, it's reliable, right? And it's automated. So you're not sitting there dealing with a scenario where now you got to do all this regression testing for the sake of your upgrade. And so that's another way that we're seeing companies thrive out there, succeed under these new kind of rules we're living in 2022. So hopefully that helps provide some relatability.
We've got 1 minute and 15 seconds left. So if anybody have any questions, if so, ask them quickly because we also have to repeat them and then be able to answer them. So but if you have any questions, please stop by and see us. Happy to help however we can. If you guys want to know more, stop by the Open Sky Group booth. It is, I don't have my glasses on.
C7575.
C7575. So we'd love to see you. Thank you all for coming out. Appreciate it.
Thank you, folks. Go get some lunch, huh? Go.